The Dow could spark a trade war and mean higher prices for everything from your car to your washer dryer, even to your beer. The White House in total chaos and morale reportedly at an all-time low. Could new questions about potential conflicts of interest be the end of Jared Kushner's career in the Oval Office? The shocking new report that his family business got $500 million in loans amidst multiple meetings at the White House. Plus, a statement that's pretty much a dare, plus a defiant dinner and a bulletproof vest. And now a president fuming at his handpicked attorney general. Who will win the battle between Jeff Sessions and President Trump? Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. A chaotic week for the Trump administration, struggling with one crisis after another, including right now as the Dow just closed down more than 400 points after President Trump announced this afternoon his intention to impose new tariffs on steel and aluminum. It had been down more than 500 points earlier. The tariffs raising concern about a possible trade war. This comes as the White House grapples with another bombshell report involving presidential son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner. The New York Times revealing the Kushner family business received loans from companies totaling $500 million amidst Kushner in his capacity as a White House official meeting with the heads of those companies. Joshua Harris, the founder of Apollo Global Management, met with Kushner on multiple occasions beginning in early 2017, three sources told the New York Times. Those sources tell the Times he was advising the administration. According to a CNN source familiar with those conversations, he was also talking about a possible role with the White House. That was discussed, though it never materialized. In November 2017, after all these meetings, Kushner Companies was given a $184 million loan by Apollo Global Management. That loan is 3 times the size of their average property loan, according to the Times. In addition, Citigroup lent Kushner Companies and one of its partners $325 million for a different project, a loan made last spring, after which Kushner met with Citigroup chief executive Michael Corbat. A spokesman for Apollo said the loan went through the standard approval process. Citigroup says its CEO was not involved in the transaction and never discussed it with Jared Kushner. A spokesman for Kushner's attorney told CNN, quote, Mr. Kushner has met with hundreds of business people during the campaign transition and in the administration to hear ideas about improving the American economy. He has had no role in the Kushner Companies since joining the government and has taken no part of any business, loans, or projects with or for the companies after that. We should note Kushner remains part owner of the company that got the loan from Apollo after he met with the head of Apollo in his official White House capacity, and Jared Kushner owns a stake in the entity that got the loan from Citigroup, after which he met with the CEO of Citigroup in his capacity as a White House official. Now, this report is just the latest calling into question Kushner's ability to function in his position as senior advisor. But sources tell CNN Kushner is planning to stay, and the White House reaffirmed that the president wants him to. Well, let's go now to CNN's Pamela Brown. Pamela, we've seen many tumultuous weeks at this White House. Is there any sense among allies of President Trump that this time all the tumult, everything going on with Jeff Sessions, with the market today, with Jared Kushner, with Hope Hicks, that it's different in any way?
Yeah, it certainly seems like it's one thing after another just in the last couple of days, Jake. And there is a sense in the White House that the morale has plummeted. And it feels to some staffers who we've spoken to who are used to the chaos, mind you, that things seem to be in a downward spiral. Even with today's tariff announcement, Jake, sources say many White House staffers were left in the dark on what is a major trade decision that has already caused the stock market to go down in reaction. But today, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders downplayed there was any chaos surrounding that announcement and beyond.
President Trump announcing plans to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum next week, a move that could spark a trade war.
Workers in our country have not been properly represented. So we're going to build our steel industry back, and we're going to build our aluminum industry back.
The president outlined the tariffs, 20% on steel and 10% on aluminum, during hastily arranged comments at the White House. The move, aimed at fulfilling a longtime campaign promise, comes a day after the White House announced the pending resignation of one of the president's longest-serving and closest advisors, Communications Director Hope Hicks.
She used to be in my real estate company. I said, "What do you know about politics?" She said, absolutely nothing. I say, congratulations, you're into the world of power, right?
Hicks' departure adding to the chaos in the West Wing, with sources describing sinking morale among staffers. Amid the turmoil, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly cracking a joke about his job in the White House at an event with current and former heads of the Department of Homeland Security.
One of the great honors of my life, being the Secretary of Homeland Security. But I did something wrong and God punished me, I guess.
Kelly's crackdown on interim security clearances leading to the loss of top secret clearance for Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, along with dozens of other White House officials. The move adding to tensions in the West Wing and raising questions from those outside the White House about Kushner's role.
I don't think he should have been there to begin with, especially with the portfolio that he had. What I'm worried about right now in the White House is the revolving door. It's spinning like a top.
Look, Jared's still a valued member of the administration, and he's going to continue to focus on the work that he's been doing.
Kushner is also facing fresh scrutiny over a report in the New York Times that his family business has received $500 million in loans from companies whose executives he met with at the White House. A spokesman for Kushner's attorney tells CNN that Kushner has met with hundreds of business people, but has had no role in the family's company since joining the government. Even though Kushner stepped down as chief executive of the company, he still retains a stake in many Kushner company holdings, according to his financial disclosure.
And Kushner's spokesperson says Kushner has had no role in Kushner Company since joining the government. Now, Sarah Sanders, you heard there, said during that press briefing today that the president does not want to fire Kushner and that he will continue in his current role. But Sanders' answer on Attorney General Jeff Sessions was far from certain, Jake. In response to a question about whether the president wants to get rid of Sessions, she would only say, "Not that I know of." Jake.
Not that I know of. Pamela Brown, thank you. My panel joins me now. So much to discuss, but let's start with the idea of Jared Kushner in his official capacity in the White House, meeting with individuals, CEOs, and loans coming either immediately before or after those meetings. This is why people, even if it's completely innocent, this is why people, Caitlin, sell, divest, get rid of their financial holdings before they go into the White House. So that there aren't questions.
Yeah, this is precisely why. This is just another addition to a string of stories that question his ability to be able to work in the West Wing and whether or not he has these outside ventures that are complicating his role. And the press secretary today at the briefing referred questions about this to his personal attorney, Abby Lowell, which just blows my mind because this is a senior advisor to the president meeting with these executives in the White House, and then his family's real estate company is benefiting from it to the tune of millions of dollars in loans. And the press secretary can't answer questions. He's a White House employee. He doesn't take a paycheck, but he certainly flies around on taxpayer-funded airplanes and benefits from the likes of working in this very high-ranking position in the White House. And the White House press secretary can't even answer questions on this. She's referring it to his outside attorney, which just is striking to me.
And Josh, there is a national security component to this. The Washington Post reported yesterday that, according to individuals who have seen the intelligence reports, there are individuals in at least 4 countries, China, the UAE, Israel, and Mexico, who have expressed the belief that they could manipulate Kushner based on financial problems that his companies are having, his naivete, and also just the complicated web of all his financial holdings. Again, we don't know that that's happened, but this is why people sell all their stuff before getting into these powerful positions.
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's exactly why the process is in place for most people who become staff or in any sort of senior administration or even congressional position. You ultimately want to divest yourself of any appearance of a conflict. And what they've done here, obviously, is put themselves in the administration in a difficult spot because you have 2 fact patterns, right? You've got the loans and then you've got the meetings. Now, I've met Josh Harris. I find it extremely hard to believe that he would put a company that he has basically built in jeopardy for a White House job, as has been suggested. That didn't happen. But we do have an appearance problem here that obviously the White House needs to deal with and Jared needs to deal with.
And what seems to be going on here, I mean, it just boggles the mind for people who have been following politics for, I mean, Jimmy Carter had to sell his peanut farm.
Right.
He had to sell his peanut farm before becoming the president. The idea that the rules don't apply.
Might have times changed, and we talk about guilt by association. Well, this is influence by association. Even if he's not running the day-to-day, there is a connection between what these bankers have done to give his family loans and his influence in the White House. And I'm not so sure. I think if he really cared about this administration and the country, the best thing to do is to, go beyond. I mean, just put away the appearance of impropriety and just leave.
And this all comes, of course, in the midst of a ton of turbulence. Hope Hicks, the latest member of the West Wing to head for the door. I want you to take a look at this photograph. This is the swearing in of senior staff shortly after the inauguration. And look at all those names who have disappeared. Omarosa, Hope Hicks, Rob Porter, Katie Walsh, Michael Flynn, Sean Spicer, Ryan Priebus, Steve Bannon, probably some others there that we can't see. Is this week, Caitlin, I mean, I know that it's been chaotic. This is your first White House you've covered, so I have to say, I don't mean to sound patronizing, but it's normally not like this. It's normally not
set pretty high.
It's normally not this crazy. But is this week even particularly crazy amidst this chaos?
Certainly. There is certainly that feeling in the White House. Even among White House staffers, they were texting me about that Kushner story saying, I can't even believe this. This is really ludicrous. So it's not just... This isn't just a normal week. That is often a running joke around the White House press corps that every day is insane. But this week has been especially a flurry of stories. Hope Hicks was a really big, significant story yesterday that really took a lot of people by surprise, not just those of us who cover the White House, but also people inside the White House. The very senior staffers were very surprised. Though they knew that she was contemplating leaving at some point, no one imagined that she would be there forever. A lot of staffers don't imagine they'll be there for forever, but it was still very, very surprising. And what's going to be interesting to see is how it affects the president day to day, because he can lose staffers like Reince Priebus and Sean Spicer and these other staffers, and it doesn't affect him on a daily level. But Hope Hicks is someone who didn't even leave the West Wing typically on a daily basis, because the president could summon her at any moment from the Oval Office with a, hey, Hope, get in here, so they could talk about whatever was on his mind. So it certainly is something very significant that it's going to affect him out of all the stories we've had this week.
Take a listen to Anthony Scaramucci on CNN this morning about the culture inside the White House.
I think it's the chief of staff. I think there's a culture of fear inside the White House, and people are afraid to talk to each other. The morale's terrible. And the reason why the morale's terrible is that the rule by fear and intimidation does not work in a civilian environment. But I predict more departures.
He also said to Bloomberg News, quote, does the president want to lose everyone because of General Jackass, a reference to General Kelly? That's his words, not mine. And we should point out General Kelly fired Scaramucci. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, the mooch, back in action, right? Why not? Let's get a little bit more of him on cable TV. He was there for a cup of coffee. He must be an expert. Look, I think he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about in terms of the fitness that General Kelly may or may not have with respect to being the chief of staff there. He clearly doesn't have any. That's part of the reason why he's showing up, because he doesn't have access to this administration, so he's irritated about it. But look, I mean, personnel issues are real, and they're difficult. And you mentioned in particular, Caitlin, with Hope, she was very, very close to the president, obviously one of the few people who had the capability of influencing him on a day-to-day basis. And that's difficult for any principal or any president to take. So they'll have to, no staff is totally irreplaceable, but it's going to take some work.
Everyone stick around. What Hope Hicks said that's now caught the attention of special counsel Robert Mueller. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
The Lead with Jake Tapper.
She feels so strongly about it, and I do. And a friend of mine, Steve Witkoff, who's a great developer in New York City. Stand up, Steve. I didn't know you were going to be here. Steve had some big difficulty he went through. Steve, come on up here. Steve has been one of my great friends over the years, tremendously successful man. And would you want to just discuss this? Because we're all among friends, or... it's a tough thing to discuss, right? But I was there when he was going through something with a very special boy, right? Go ahead.
I remember the hug you gave me when I felt all was lost. I listened to Eric's story. I lost my son in 2011, and he didn't buy drugs on the dark net. He bought drugs on the internet. A website owned by 3 of the largest U.S. corporations in the country today. So it's not just the dark net, but he was a great kid, and he detoxed the first night with me. So he was my special child. So if I lost him, I always felt like hopeless before you were elected. And I've never lobbied my friend about anything. I've just supported you because I so believe in you. But if my son knew that you were going to take up this battle, oh my gosh, he must be upstairs applauding every single day. So I am so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. You take it away. And Steve went through something where he thought everything was perfect. He thought everything was fine. And his boy was recovered. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he got some very bad news. So I fully understand what you're going through. The administration's going to be rolling out policy over the next 3 weeks, and it'll be very, very strong. I've also spoken with Jeff about bringing a lawsuit against some of these opioid companies. I mean, what they're doing and the way the distribution. And you have people that go to the hospital with a broken arm and they come out and they're addicted. They're addicted to painkillers and they don't even know what happened. They go in for something minor and they come out and they're in serious shape. So we're going to very much, as you know, I think we've been involved more than any administration by far. It's a problem that's growing, and drugs are a similar but different problem in the sense that we have pushers and we have drug dealers that they kill hundreds and hundreds of people, and most of them don't even go to jail. If you shoot one person, they give you life, they give you the death penalty. These people can kill 2,000, 3,000 people, and nothing happens to them. And we need strength with respect to the pushers and to the drug dealers. And if we don't do that, you're never going to solve the problem. If you want to be weak and you want to talk about just blue ribbon committees, that's not the answer. The answer is you have to have strength and you have to have toughness. The drug dealers, the drug pushers have a very, very tough penalty, the ultimate penalty. And by the way, they have much less of a drug problem than we do. So we're going to have to be very strong on penalties. Hopefully we can do some litigation against the opioid companies. I think it's very important because a lot of states are doing it. But I keep saying if the states are doing it, why isn't the federal government doing it? So that'll happen. In the meantime, I just want to pay my respects to everybody. Some of you have gone through a lot. Many of you in this room have gone through a lot, more than anyone can imagine. We're with you 100%. We're fighting for you, and we're going to win. We're going to win. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
All right, President Trump dropping by an opioid summit there at the White House, and pretty interesting. Obviously, the White House, the administration as a whole, has been looking at taking on manufacturers and distributors. You heard him talking about drug pushers there, but also something that may have made your ears perk up, where he talked about some countries having the ultimate punishment for drug crimes. That, of course, would be capital punishment, and that is something that he has hinted at before. So what exactly does he mean? What exactly proposal would that what would that look like? We do not know, but certain loans from two companies after Kushner met with the heads of those companies right inside the White House. And Kushner reportedly discussed giving the co-founder of one of those companies a job within the administration. Kushner, who is the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, was among a group of White House officials stripped of their top-level access after working on a temporary clearance for more than a year. I want to bring in Democratic Congressman Anthony Brown of Maryland with us now. He is a retired Army colonel, Harvard-educated lawyer, and the former lieutenant governor of Maryland. And, sir, you are also on the House Ethics Committee, so we appreciate you being with us.
Yeah, it's great to be on today.
So Jared Kushner has had his security clearance downgraded, but we learned that there were 4 different countries that were considering using his financial woes and his lack of experience in government to try to manipulate him. And then you have this latest bombshell about his meeting with bankers. Given the problems surrounding Kushner, do you believe that what he's done is something that's unethical?
I think it's unethical. I think it also presents a risk to the security interests of this country, and frankly, I think he ought to be removed from the White House. He has demonstrated that if you're not going to distance yourself from your outside business interests and continue to take meetings with business people who are going to provide loans to your company, you've got no business being in government, let alone the White House.
What's your reaction, though, today? We just heard moments ago from Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary, asked about Jared Kushner and really the stability of his role in the White House, and she made it really clear it is stable.
Look, if Mr. Kushner was a member of Congress, I have no doubt that an ethics claim would probably be filed with the Ethics Committee. We'd be looking at a conflict of interest. He's a senior government official. He's got outside business interests. He's taking meetings with companies that are later giving him or his family's business large outsized loans. That is, if not an actual, it's certainly a perceived conflict of interest. And the best way for it to be addressed would be for Mr. Kushner to no longer work at the White House.
Let's talk about guns, because this meeting that we saw between President Trump and a bipartisan group of lawmakers yesterday was pretty stunning. Do you think, when you listened to what he said, and I'm sure you were surprised by some of the things you heard, did you think that he sounded like he had a lot in common with you, that he might actually sound more like a Democrat than a Republican when it comes to gun control?
Well, one of the things that the president suggested, and he's suggested it before, is to raise the age on purchasing or selling assault weapons. I filed a bill 3 days ago. It's probably one of the few bipartisan bills that have been filed this Congress to restrict the access to guns. And so I think that we can find common ground to raise from age 18 to 21 in order for someone to buy an assault weapon. That would put it on parity with what the age requirement to buy a handgun in this country.
So rhetorically, at this point in time, and we don't know what the policies are. We know that we've heard from the Senate side. It sounds like Republicans aren't planning on unveiling anything next week. Rhetorically, there are a lot of similarities, but I do wonder, between President Trump, what would have been the reaction if President Obama had said something like we heard Donald Trump yesterday, where he said, take the guns first and worry about due process second?
Look, there would have been an uproar, certainly among Republicans, if President Obama had uttered those words. But I think here we can find some common ground on a few narrow issues that I think there's common ground, like raising the age on purchasing assault weapons, banning bump stocks. I think after what we saw, the horrific carnage in Las Vegas, I think there is an overwhelming majority of members of the House that would support banning bump stocks. And also background checks, if not universal, certainly enhanced background checks, so that we can make sure that those who shouldn't have access to a firearm don't. I think we can find some common ground, and that's what we need to work towards.
Senator Marco Rubio just announced his own bill. Of course, you have introduced that bipartisan bill that you referenced. But his bill, among it, the items in it are temporary gun restraining orders, which would allow someone to petition a court to block someone having access to guns. What do you think about that? Is that something that you would support? Is that something that you think could pass the House, where Republicans have control?
It's certainly something I can support. I think in all too many of these incidents, we certainly saw it in Florida at Parkland, there are these red flags. There are these indicators that a person has some issues, often associated with mental health, although I don't want to suggest that everybody with mental health challenges presents a danger to society. But we have seen red flags. And where family or friends or teachers or others in the community see red flags that might suggest that somebody will do harm to themselves or others that they may be likely to obtain if they don't already have a firearm, I think we ought to be able to relax the standards where we can put a temporary halt, some sort of restraint, to make sure that we are taking a close look, where necessary, remove the gun. If it turns out after a closer look that there's no real threat, then the person ought to be able to retain the weapon. But I think I can get behind what Senator Rubio is talking about. Can we get the entire House or a majority in the House of Representatives? I'm less optimistic, but certainly it's something we ought to be looking at doing.
Congressman Brown, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
The nickname Mr. Magoo that President Trump is reportedly using for Attorney General Jeff Sessions as their once
most trusted name in news.
The White House moments ago weighing in on the public fight between President Trump and his Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
Does the president want to get rid of his Attorney General?
Not that I know of.
Well, this comes after Sessions pushed back on the president's latest insult, calling Sessions' handling of an investigation into alleged surveillance abuses disgraceful. Then CNN captured some exclusive video of Sessions and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, key because he's overseeing the Mueller investigation, as they left the Justice Department and walked down the street. At one point in this video, Sessions actually pumps his fist in the air. Then later, Axios snapped some photos of these gentlemen dining at a fancy Washington restaurant not too far from Trump International Hotel. It's significant, right, to see these two together because Rosenstein is overseeing the special counsel investigation into Russian meddling after Sessions recused himself. And then you have the Washington Post reporting that President Trump's public shaming of Sessions over that recusal is now part of special counsel Mueller's investigation. I want to talk this over now with Daniel Goldman. He's a former federal prosecutor, and Laura Jarrett. She's our CNN Justice reporter. Okay, Laura, I mean, how big a deal is this outing that we saw? What intrigue to watch these guys head publicly to go dine together?
Absolutely. I think it's fair to see this as a show of force, a showing of solidarity in a day where, once again, the president attacked his attorney general and attacked the independence of the Justice Department on Twitter, Brianna. And for the first time ever, Sessions fired back. He didn't aim at his head, but he certainly made it clear enough was enough. He invoked the Constitution. He invoked the rule of law. He was defending his own integrity and honor. And I think the showing of dinner last night with the top three officials at the Justice Department spoke volumes.
And Daniel, I wonder what you thought when you listened to Sarah Sanders and she was asked, you know, does the president want to fire Sessions? Not that I know of. I mean, what'd you make of that response?
Well, it's certainly not unequivocal. That much we know. But remember, the beef and the tension between Trump and Sessions has been going on for quite some time now. This is not the first time that this has come up. There have been reports that Trump has wanted to fire Sessions and has been convinced out of doing it. I think Trump recognizes from a political standpoint that it's a difficult thing for him to do right now, given all of the grief and criticism that he has made to Sessions over the past several months. He then is going to have to get another attorney general confirmed in a Senate where Sessions was for 20 years. So I think Trump's trying to convince Sessions to resign, because I think if Sessions resigns, then the Senate will have a much more difficult time saying we're not going to confirm another attorney general, as opposed to if Trump fires him.
Now, Sessions didn't seem to indicate any willingness to resign, but I wonder what you thought yesterday when, so the president tweets at him, insults him, and how he's handling things. Sessions was so strong in his response. Why do you think that he stood up to the president now?
Well, Jeff Sessions is a lifelong public servant, and while Trump and Sessions have similar policy views and perhaps political views, Sessions has been in government for his entire career, essentially, and Trump has been in the private sector for his entire career. And I think what Sessions is recognizing and acknowledging is that law and order matters. The process matters. And this is also right on the heels of Trump making the comment about how we're going to take the guns and then we'll go through due process. To a lawyer, you hear that and you say to yourself, what are you talking about? You can't
it's
just
violating
go,
rights.
Absolutely. There are any number of constitutional rights that's violating. So you can't do that. And I think that Sessions is essentially saying, I'm following the proper protocols that are in place and have been in place for a very long time. You asked me to look into this. I am referring it to the Inspector General. This is the FISA abuse that Trump tweeted about. And that's the proper protocols and procedures. And Trump's tweet is wrong as well on the law, because the Inspector General does have prosecutorial power if he finds that anyone within the Department of Justice has violated
the country. Let us come meet with you. Call us at 1-800-213-8000.
Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson wants to cancel a $31,000 mahogany dining set ordered for his office amid allegations of excessive spending using taxpayer money. Carson's move comes after House Oversight Chairman Trey Gowdy, a Republican, announced an investigation into Carson's redecorating spree. Carson now saying, quote, I was as surprised as anyone to find out that a $31,000 dining set had been ordered. We will find another solution for the furniture replacement replacement. This whole thing came to light after a HUD employee turned whistleblower alleged that she was demoted in part for refusing to spend more than legally allowed on other office furnishings. I want to talk this over now with Jeff Trotter. He is an interior designer in Los Angeles. Jeff, thanks for joining us. And you, of course, are in the enviable position of spending other people's money on interior design, which must be very fun, having looked at some of the interiors that you've done. But this price tag, I mean, what do you think about a price tag of $31,000 for a dining set?
First of all, thanks for having me. You know, to give us a little bit of perspective, some of my high-end clientele with large disposable incomes, this would not be unusual for. But given the fact that this is a government employee that has budgetary restrictions placed on what they're allowed to spend to furnish their office space, this budget of $5,000, I mean, this blows past it. And the fact that this comes down to, a misuse of taxpayer money, it looks like a big PR scandal for this administration, just in the long line of others that have come to surface over the past few months.
So when you look at, well, first off, I mean, what do you think about, you've seen the pieces. What do you think about these pieces for that kind of price tag?
I mean, they're beautiful pieces. They're opulent. And I think...
Yeah, how would you describe them aesthetically?
They're extremely traditional. I know that I'd seen that there's some onyx inlay and blue velvet for the upholstered chairs. They're opulent, and I think there are many more affordable options when it comes to decorating a space such as this that could follow a little bit more closely with their budgetary restrictions.
Okay, so you've worked with all kinds of budgetary restrictions. We understood from this whistleblower that when it came to that $5,000 cap on the office furniture, someone had said to her, you can't get a good chair for $5,000. I mean, what do you say to that?
I say that's not true. You can get a great chair for under $5,000.
Or a whole set. Could you get it? Could you
yes.
do his whole office under that cap?
It would be a bit tight to do the entire dining set and the hutch and the tables for $10,000.
Well, separately, if you
right.
separate, because I think that the dining set is separate. If you're talking about, so the
Absolutely.
dining set's over here, and let's just be reasonable about that, and then you have the office furniture. What would you think about the office furniture with a cap of $5,000?
Absolutely, it's more than doable, and I think most experienced interior designers know how to design a space that's both beautiful and functional with a budget such as that.
Have you ever had a situation where you are trying to come up with, I'm not trying to say that $5,000 is frugal, but obviously you are dealing with some clients who are pretty rich. If you're looking at something that's a little, that is less money than some of your clients, I mean, what are some of the things that you would consider that obviously these folks at HUD should be looking at?
There are a lot of ways that you can commission pieces to be built that are custom, that are not as opulent as some of these pieces that are being reported. There are obviously great stores that you can purchase items similar to these from that are much more cost effective. This just seems like a real extravagance. Again, it's important to impress upon the American public that this is taxpayer money, and a lot of the American public are bringing home maybe $31,000 in their annual salary. So when you hear something like this, I think it leaves a bad taste in people's mouths that our HUD secretary is willing to just frivolously throw away this money to decorate a space that most of the public